which look at certification of those incubators. So not anybody just come and put an incubator. There has to be rules that have to be achieved in order to be certified and have to be followed to be sure that all these incubators do follow the rules, to be sure that they give opportunity to the incubatees to be successful. Without interfering in the details, as was mentioned before, no bureaucracy, but you need oversight. Now, as far as BADR is concerned, it is a program that is really so far been, we think, has created some success stories. It helps those incubatees in various areas, in the legal aspect, in the business plans, in the technical aspects, and also in networking. There are lots of activities in this area, and also some activities like startup weekends and so forth, entrepreneurship training, and also selecting some entrepreneurs and sending them outside to learn more and see what other experiences are. So this event is one of the activities that BADR is doing to improve the incubation ecosystem in the country. And we can see here, for example, we have a plan. Part of the plan that we started is to have, by 2015, 20 incubators throughout the kingdom, 2020, 40, and by 2025, 80 incubators. And the number of clients we estimated to be 280 in 2015, and then increasing up to 225 and so forth. And what we have achieved so far is about, in the kingdom, 20, by the way, these are not, many of these incubators are started by independently, but the ecosystem, the idea is of helping the ecosystem to improve. And we see in the kingdom now 24 incubators, number of clients actually exceeding we're actually exceeding the targets. Some of the major targets we have in 2015 has been already exceeded in 2014. So we can see the targets, well, employment is close, number of graduate companies more, and employment is close. So we see that the target is reasonable, what we had before, and we hope we exceed the targets in 2020 and 2025. And some of the activities, for example, that BADR does is awareness workshops, feasibility studies, management support. These are the services that it gives to some of the incubators, and we have a list of the incubators that are working, and organizations related to it that are working with CACST on this. And so some of the achievements just highlights, there are 4 incubators that are fully under supervision of BADR. There are, you just saw today, an acquisition internationally by a company in UAE of one of the incubatees. And we're very happy to see that, and it's a great success. The acceptance rate is like top schools in the US. It's very, very small. It's 4.4%. Okay? I don't know if Berkeley close to that, Professor, but it's really tough because, again, you know, we want, in fact, many of those who are turned away, turned up, you know, they were very satisfied and very happy because they were saying, I could have invested a lot of money and this idea, you know, may not work. So after discussions, you know, you help people to change, to go and do something different than what they were thinking. So by turning away many of the failures, I think is something, you know, a major contribution. So they're very selective to be sure that the companies are really strong and can be, the ideas can be successful. And we have 82 startups currently. again, the jobs, as I mentioned, is direct jobs is not the measure. The measure is the impact on the economy. And 8 graduates. We have a network for the Saudi Business Incubator Network. Is very important. Information is shared between the community, and I think this network throughout the universities and the Chamber of Commerce participations, and I attended some of their activities. It's really fantastic to see this kind of network developing in the kingdom. And several of those incubators I mentioned supported. They reach up to 15,000 innovators, researchers, entrepreneurs. So it's really a large number of community. And we see in the first half of 2014, 11 million generated from those not graduated. The graduated have generated like the one today. I don't know, I cannot reveal what the value for the acquisition, but it's in the tens of millions. So we hope that we see successful like Anwani today. And again, the startup weekends is really fantastic. In one weekend, several companies are created, maybe 13, 14 companies, every activity created. But of course, from these, only 3 or 2 are selected at battle because of the, but these activities will continue, and we are planning to intensify these activities in the future. And finally, I will talk just shortly about venture capital that has been working very hard on it. And now we've agreed with Riyadh Capital, one of the largest banks in the kingdom. We created the Riyadh Taqniyya Venture Capital Fund. The fund is about 500 million Saudi riyal. Major government agencies committed to fund almost half of this, and we are working with the private sector to finish the rest. And we hope to close this by the summer. But we're working hard because we need, if we cannot get the private sector, we'll finish it from the government. We want the private sector to be part of this. So we create a true venture capital. This is going to look both locally and internationally. And Taqniyya has established the company Taqniyya, which is a national company for technology development and commercialization. This one, we created a Taqniyya International. This is a US company, and the office is really in the heart of Silicon Valley, as was mentioned. Actually, it's on Sand Hill Road. The address is 3000 Sand Hill Road, which is those who are in the capital, venture capital business, they understand that address, because around you is Sequoia and Khosla and all of those. Client Perkins is just walking distance around you. And so we think we are building on the networking to help the success of venture capital in the kingdom. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Turki. Our second speaker of this session is Ms. Dorit Hopner, who is the Chief Executive of European Private Equity and Venture Capital Association. She represents the industry at the very highest level of business and government, and a regular commentator in the international media in all aspects of the private equity industry. In 2012, Financial News named her the most influential person in European private equity. And in 2012 and 13 and 14, she was one of the top most influential figures in Europe. She gained the degree of economics at Free University in Germany in 1993. This university was established immediately after the World War II at 1948. Please welcome Ms. Hopner, who is representing the title of the role of government in venture capital.
thank you very much for the kind introduction. Your Highness Dr. Turkey, Mr. Al-Fahaf, thank you so much for inviting me. It's a great pleasure to be here today and to speak in front of such a distinguished audience. First of all, I would like to congratulate Saudi Arabia, I must say, for their activities to boost an innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem here in this country. This is quite amazing to see. I think you have developed a great plan, and it will be fascinating to see how this is progressing in the future. And congratulations also to the first Saudi Arabian venture capital fund. I think that's great news for the global venture capital industry, that venture capital is now also is settling in Saudi Arabia. Wonderful. So let me first maybe introduce EVCA to you so that you know who I am and why I am talking about venture capital. We are the Industry Association. The European Venture Capital Association does represent the venture capital firms and the private equity firms in Europe. So we are not a public institution of any sort. We are funded by the membership fees of our members, again, venture capital firms, private equity firms, but we also have insurance companies as members and pension funds in Europe. Those pension funds, those insurance companies that invest into the asset class venture capital. And so we do represent their interests. We do speak to policymakers, to EU policymakers mainly. This is why we are based in Brussels. And we were founded in 1983, actually when the EU Commission, the European Commission, approached some venture capital firms and said, look, we would like to learn more about venture capital. Why don't you form up as an association, and so we can then always discuss what we as policymakers can do to foster venture capital in Europe. And so we go way back, over 30 years now, and by now we have 700 members and another 500 affiliate members, and again, policy, working around policy issues, but also promoting the asset class, venture capital and private equity is very high on our agenda. Venture capital can have a huge benefit, a huge positive impact on each economy, wherever the economy is in the world. Venture capital is more than just capital. It also brings the expertise, the know-how, and the networks that young companies need to the table. And so we like to say venture capital is smart capital. And so clearly, Europe is also lucky to have many very successful venture capital firms that manage to build very successful companies. And if you look at this chart, you see that there are many firms that you certainly also have heard of, like Skype, Spotify, probably everyone has that on their mobile devices. They were founded in Europe, and they made it to the top. So those are the companies over time that made it to the 1 billion euro threshold, and once a company is so successful that it gets such high valuations, they are called unicorns. Very nice word. So let me remind us very briefly of the business model, venture capital. So this funding of these companies needs, of course, you need investors, and so you also need to bring, in a way, the capital for these firms together, because they are institutional, they are investors out there who want to make money by investing in these startups, because they hope that they will generate returns through these companies. And so venture capital brings the demand and the supply of this long-term investment capital together. Venture capital is actually a market like stock exchanges. A stock exchange doesn't do anything differently. It's also bringing demand and supply together for companies, but not for private companies, but for publicly listed companies. And venture capital brings the supply and demand together for privately held companies. And so it's very much a market. And if there wouldn't be a high demand for venture capital, like companies looking for this kind of funding, the industry wouldn't exist. There has been a huge amount of publications and research done on why venture capital is important to the economy. And so this slide tries to summarize some of these findings. And I don't think we have to go in greater detail. If you're interested, we have a research library on our website at EBCA that summarizes and that shows all the research being done on venture capital. Trust me, venture capital is really good for companies. So if a company has a venture capital investor on board, these companies usually do much better than companies without a venture capital investor. Because again, it's not only capital, it's also the know-how, it's the expertise. And so these companies have much more than the potential to grow. The tricky bit is to find these companies and to invest in those companies that really have the potential to be successful one day. Since I'm from Europe, I need to give you some data, because that's also what the EBCA is doing. We collect the industry data. So we ask all our venture capital members every quarter to submit their data to us. And here you see how things have been evolving over the last years, since 2007. It has been going down since 2007, which is no surprise actually, because 2007 was a boom year in many respects. I mean, the whole European economy, the global economy was booming. That was just before the financial market crisis hit the world. And so if you take 2007 as a reference, you obviously always are bound to go down if you show numbers. Fundraising, fundraising are the numbers. What have venture capital, the amount that venture capital firms have managed to attract from their investors. Again, it's insurance companies, university endowments, pension funds, family offices. Those are the investors in the asset class so far.